It's both a report and a brand new solutions finance tracker tool that allows you to see where is finance flowing, where is finance not flowing, and where are there opportunities to really drive impact together.
The current version tracks about $400 billion of private investments, philanthropy, and government funding to about 11,000 US-based nonprofits and companies, and it's tracking data from about 14,000 funders.
Welcome. Today we are here with Justin Winters, the Executive Director of OneEarth, and Eric Berlow, CEO of Vibrant Data Labs. And we're here to talk about minding the gaps in climate finance. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Really.
Welcome back to the show as well, Justin. You were one of our episodes way back when in season 1, so it's great to have you in the hot seat again.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, and nice to meet you, Eric.
Yeah, great to meet you.
So what is this new Minding the Gaps report and tool?
So we've been working together for a couple of years, and just this week we launched Minding the Gaps. It's both a report and a brand new solutions finance tracker tool that allows you to see where is finance flowing, where is finance not flowing, and where are there opportunities to really drive impact together. So it's both a report that kind of tells you the narrative and some key insights, and then a tool that allows you to dive deeply into the data.
And where does Vibrant Data Labs fit within this initiative?
Yeah, so we're a social mission data science company, and our goal is just to try to make it as easy as possible for money to flow to where it needs to go from a big systems perspective. And so we've been doing the work behind the scenes on tracking the money to the solution framework that OneEarth had, defined through all their research. And my background is in ecology and complex systems, and people talk a lot about climate as this systemic problem. It's just we got to tackle it holistically from a systems lens. And the OneEarth climate model is that systems model that's defining what to do. And so once that's all defined, then the simplest way to affect change at a systems level is to fill the hole, to mind the gaps in where the money's not going. So that's where we were working together on that.
Excellent. And Justin, love to hear a brief introduction of OneEarth and your background, but also if you can talk a bit about the solutions framework, since that preceded a lot of this work.
Yeah. So prior to leading OneEarth, I led the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation for 13 years. And in that experience of both doing movement building and communications work along with strategic grant making, and this started back in 2008 through about 2019, we just saw kind of a lack of clarity around whether or not you could solve the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss, and a real cohesive solution set. And people were really talking about things in silos. And so back when I was working with Leo, we started to invest in science, working with a broad network of scientists and academic institutes and experts asking that question. And obviously we were in a privileged position to be able to do that, but it was really amazing to bring together a network and a cohort of folks and ask challenging questions. And then ultimately that led to the OneEarth climate model, which originally came out in 2019, and subsequently there's been multiple versions of it released. And that climate model shows that it's possible to achieve the critical 1.5 degrees C goal. And our most recent update, called Razor's Edge, shows that even if we have to overshoot that a bit, we can come back to it. And most importantly, we can do it with existing solutions, existing technologies, and in ways that are harmonious with nature and really honor local land stewards and local communities and indigenous land stewardship. So both that climate model and then subsequent pieces of science that we worked on nature conservation, regenerative agriculture, led to the development of the OneEarth Solutions Framework, which is a comprehensive set of about 75 different solution pathways across 3 core action pillars that have very specific goals that we need to achieve. So you can check all that out on our website and kind of dive into it. But the critical things to remember are that we can solve the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss, and we need to achieve 3 things. We need to, attain 100% clean, renewable energy for all people. at the center, and I love placing this at the center because I feel like it's the most undervalued piece, and it's so critical, is nature conservation. So protecting, connecting, and restoring approximately 50% of the world's lands and oceans. And then the last piece is that we need to transition our food and our fiber systems to regenerative agriculture, away from extractive agriculture and industrial scale agriculture to methodologies that are conducive to biodiversity and human health. So when you dive into the solutions framework, you can see all those solutions pathways. But I think it's, folks find it really moving because there's a sense of values behind it that really honor living systems and all people. But then on top of that, what is very complicated gets synthesized into 3 core goals that we need to collectively achieve.
Yeah.
And that makes it feel accessible.
It's really clarifying. Yeah, because I didn't have a background in this in particular, when I was first, we were doing just tracking where's the money going, and the question is in climate, what counts as in, what counts as not. It's a big, fuzzy defined problem. And then when I started collaborating with One Earth, I was like, oh, there's energy transition, fix the food system, and protect nature. Done. Get it.
And we don't have to block out the sun.
Exactly.
Just do those 3 things.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, if we do those things, we're just all better off, period. Right. We get free energy. We don't have pollution. We get, we have all these, it's all like a pretty much a better future. So for me, it shifted the conversation from climate action is just screaming from the rooftops that to convince everybody there's a problem to actually framing what are we doing? Yeah. And if you track the data on money, like investments in climate relevant companies, et cetera, for over a century, we've known what the problem's been defined like no other. Right. And even if you think about Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, we're still just shouting from the rooftops. The only goal was to convince everybody the problem is real. Yeah. When the solution frameworks came out, then all of a sudden the increase in investment into climate solutions just skyrocketed, and it surpassed the growth, twice the growth of the broader market, because then investors know what to invest in, or funders know what to do. But if it's all just about convincing people there's a problem, they don't know what to do. So it's not just clarifying, but it actually mobilizes money.
Right, and it's clarifying at that top level, those 3 pillars. Right. But like you said, there's 75.
Yeah, because if you're going to fund it, then you don't fund the energy transition. You fund a particular, you fund a new kind of battery. You fund, like a heat pump that can be installed in low-income apartment buildings. You're funding solutions. So it doesn't work if you just track the money to, just like how much went to, this one big economic sector. You need to know where's it going to specific solutions, and it's the detail that matters. Yeah, right.
And specific companies and nonprofits.
Yeah, for sure. But even So we track it at the company level or the nonprofit level, but then roll it up into each solution so you can see how many are working on it, which ones are neglected. That kind of thing.
So we have this solutions framework from One Earth, the 3 pillars, the 75 different solutions. That gives us a map of the territory that we need to move towards. Right. But then there's the question of where's the money going today? To which organizations? From which organizations? Right. And that's been largely opaque, right? We've kind of been missing a map.
Yeah, nobody knows how much is going. And I mean, it's already a huge accomplishment, like I was saying, that we know what needs to be done. Right. I mean, I've worked on a lot of different kinds of complex problems in my career, like from Middle Eastern conflict to disinformation as a data scientist, and climate's the only one. When I got into it, I was like, oh, they actually know what needs to be done. And there's consensus on it, and there's models,
real science,
and there's models showing oh, if we do this, we can do it. I'm like, I mean, there's no consensus roadmap for tackling Middle Eastern conflict. There's no consensus roadmap for fixing the education system, right? But with climate, they're like, oh wow, we know what to do. It's not easy, but the problem is that once it's distilled down like this, it's still kind of a Hail Mary, perfect storm of solutions scenario. And it's not just that there's no silver bullet; it's that if anything goes undone, we lose, So that's the trick, It's that there's all these critical things that we need to do, and we can't just fund, solar panels and do really well on that.
Right.
We can't just fund, electric cars and solar photovoltaics, and then if there's no way to connect the two, everybody's driving coal-powered electric cars. Like there's all these dependencies. So as a system, so that's kind of the positive side is we know what to do like no other problem at a really unprecedented level of detail, and yet it all needs to be done. So that's why gaps matter. Right. Like gaps in that kind of a thing, that is the simplest way to tackle a complex problem that's been defined is fill the gaps.
Right.
But,
So where do we get this data, and how have we gone about this process of actually mapping the gaps and the tracking the finance?
Right. So I was originally, when we started doing this, it was approached by a large venture philanthropy group, a family office, and a corporate foundation, and they were new to funding climate or investing in climate solutions, and they were like, we just have no idea who's doing what. Could you help us see that? And so one approach that's common is you try to find all the funders and get them to release their data on who they're funding, and it requires special relationships with them and all the rest. And the other way is bottom up, to be like, well, let's just search the databases of companies that got funded, that got investments, nonprofits through the tax filings that got money, and then from that, figure out which ones are relevant, and then sum them all up, right? And so that's the approach we took, because then it's publicly available, or you can purchase the data, right? And so we just go and we just get any nonprofit, any company. This is U.S. focused right now because the money's easy, the data's easier for that right now, but the methods are pretty generic. But you just say, okay, let's just go to their website, scrape and summarize everything off their website. What are they actually doing? And then, as you know, language models have been getting a lot better. It wasn't when we started this, but so what are they doing? And then we build models to recognize like the descriptions of a company that is relevant to solving the problem. So like we know agriculture is relevant. Not all investments in agriculture are relevant to solving the problem. There might be more like industrial agriculture. So we search for anything relevant to agriculture, but then we filter it out with the model based on like, no, that's regenerative ag. That's sustainable fertilizers. It's not, industrial fertilizer company or something like that.
Right.
So that's the idea.
It's a big data challenge, though.
Yeah. No, it's a big data challenge. It's fuzzy. It's unique. It's not, and there is no, when you search databases, there is no like tag for everything. Like this is climate relevant. And as we've just talking, solving it is not just solar panels and electric cars. It's everything from nature to regenerative agriculture to, everything, fixing the food system, fixing the fiber system. So so you got to go broad,
right? And
then you got to figure out what's in, what's out. So we just constantly evolve that over time, and we've set it up so that you can iterate it and update it. And rather than if you manually did it, then you're stuck on that one framework and that one pass. You can't revise it.
And for all our fellow tech geeks, like can you give any more detail on the back end here of like what amount of data you're working with and how you've architected this?
Yeah, so right now, it's the data sources right now that we're using are Crunchbase for investments and other non-equity kinds of rounds, and then Candid, which is mostly non-90 tax filings, and then we're kind of more piecing together like a lot of existing pieces of technology. We make all our work open source. For example, it's and that's as a mission first company. Right. That's what we do. Right. And the idea is to make the tools public. But we synthesize the websites. We try to summarize them. We then we use language models to build some that we're releasing publicly to identify is this climate relevant or not. Then what we do is we for every solution in the One Earth framework, we get good descriptions of those. Like we just want language of like what is vertical farming, and then we run through, so let's say we've got like hundreds of thousands of companies and nonprofits, and we run through and we find all the descriptions that are that are the best conceptual match, and then we can tag them to vertical farming, and then we can sum up, well, how much private investment, how much philanthropy is going there, and who's doing it, and then who are the funders. Yeah. So it's kind of like it's just, and then we also do some network analysis on like who's co-funding with whom, and that kind of thing as well. But it's pretty flexible to do that. So in the process of doing it, we realized that there were some parts of the One Earth solution framework that weren't really clear, that the way that organizations on the ground described their work didn't really match well with the way that we were dividing up the problem. And so then we revised the framework a little bit and then rerun it, and then we get better matches.
Right.
So it's an iterative process that because we're trying to learn how do we define the problem in a way that's relevant to what people are actually doing and what people might be funding.
So what's like the total size and scope of this?
Yeah. So right now the current version tracks about $400 billion of private investments, philanthropy, and government funding to about 11,000 U.S.-based nonprofits and companies that are climate relevant, and it's tracking data from about 14,000 funders, and then we have a companion map for the venture side of it. Who's investing in companies. We've got who's co-investing with whom for about maybe 2,500 investors and funders in climate.
Awesome.
Yeah,
great. So you have all this data. You've been mapping climate finance data, and then you're putting this One Earth Solutions framework as kind of the primary lens on top of it, or kind of mapping this finance activity into the solutions framework. And now we have this report and tool that people can actually go play with the data themselves and see it, but also the report that kind of gives some of the summary and the synthesis.
Right.
So what are some of the key points? Like what are we learning? What are we observing? Hundreds of billions of dollars sounds like we're doing great, right?
The problem is that most of the money goes to a few shiny objects, right?
Yeah.
And so, and what's interesting, if you look just at the counts of organizations, of those 11,000 entities we track, maybe like over 40% are tagged to the nature pillar. It's like a lot of nature nonprofits across oceans, lands, ecosystem restoration, et cetera. But then when you summarize it, the money, it's 4% of the money. So 40%, it's like a lot of nonprofits getting very little money. And 4% of the money going to that. And in the One Earth model, that's projected to account for 45% of avoided emissions by 2055, right? So it's 4% of the money for a solution pillar that's almost half of our avoided emissions by 2055. So it's a big gap.
Yeah.
And then the two other top line stats across our three pillars to remember is that the lion's share of the financing is going to renewable energy. So 89% of the tracked finance is going to energy, which isn't a bad thing. It's exciting and it makes a lot of sense because so many of those solutions are market-based and taking off. But it's certainly not going to get us to an end goal of a healthy living, balanced climate and planet. Right. And then the other one, regenerative agriculture, receives just 7%. So we have some significant work to do to really make sure that financing flows in a much more strategic way to achieve the goals that we have to achieve. And also, sorry, Eric.
It's not that like energy's overfunded and we have a lot to do.
Right.
But it's that we just need more filling in the other holes. And there is a lot of money on the sidelines that could come in. Yeah. And the idea is to just help them, make that. Be like, I didn't know I could do that, and I can make a difference there. Right?
Well, and there's gaps across all three pillars. It's really interesting, and we can dive into that. The key insights that we're seeing across energy, nature conservation, and regenerative agriculture. So it's not just a story of we need to ramp up funding to nature conservation and to regenerative agriculture. It's also that we have to be highly strategic in how we place capital to the solution sets across those three pillars and what type of capital is available to flow where. So the story gets, this is not surprising, but it gets very nuanced.
Yeah, like if you go into energy, and that's what's cool to go into detail, because a lot of reports on where money's going will just look at the economic sector level, but then you dive into energy solutions, it's almost 90% of the money, and then half of that is solar photovoltaics. And then if you look at the new One Earth, Razor's Edge model that was just released, solar photovoltaics is projected to contribute to about, I think it's like 18% of final renewable energy demand in 2055, but it's getting 50% of the money. And renewable heat is 25% of energy demand. It's really important in industry, but it gets 2% of the energy money. So there's a lot of opportunities for investing in new technologies in renewable heat that people aren't thinking about, because what gets the headlines is solar PV and other things like that. And then, and it's also, I think there's a lot of money that flows that's just based on people's conversations with each other, investors or funders, where they met at a cocktail party and they're like, "Oh, you should fund this. This is really great." But it's not their fault, but it's just that they don't have that big picture to realize like, oh, I could actually, for the same money, make a lot more, make a huge difference over here.
It really helps me. I mean, even though I've been familiar with the framework, I'm just having a bit of an aha of how important that climate model is, because on the one hand, you could say, okay, well, solar is getting a lot more than conservation, but it's like, well, but we need that money for solar. So just comparing the two isn't necessarily the right answer to say one's better than the other, because the relative comparison doesn't absolve the need for the absolute cups to fill.
Right. Every piece has to add up.
Right. Yeah. And I guess if we had a perfect map of like how much do we need and what period of time, but I think the climate model is a really good guiding, model to go against, because what you're saying is like, okay, well, we've worked out the math from backwards of here are all the things that we're going to need to do to have a stable, like the goal is a stable living planet, right? Like that's what we're actually benchmarked against, not all these other attractions.
Yeah, and we're not saving the planet, we're saving human civilization, right? Yeah.
That too, right? Yeah. So, okay, survival of the species, stability of the planet. And so, like looking at that energy mix composition, the greenhouse gas, contributions, the different aspects of these pillars, what those look like in the end model, and then comparing to, okay, well, how's our current funding relative to the importance of these activities? And those are the gaps, right? So conservation's a big gap in terms of number of dollars. Even then within things like renewable energy, we have big gaps in terms of maybe how much we're doing solar versus heat. Any other kind of, solutions or specifics that really jump out to you in terms of key gaps?
Well, maybe just to add in here too, is that what became immediately apparent when we started seeing the results of the work with Vibrant Data Labs was there's so many gaps and there's so many stories to be told. So we ended up deciding not to just produce one stagnant 100-page report, but that this would be the first in a series.
Cool.
Because there's so many stories to tell. And they deserve to be told in a way that feels relevant, makes sense, and really compels people to act differently.
Yeah.
So this first one is kind of laying the groundwork of what we're seeing across the landscape and some of the key insights and key gaps. But there's so many stories to tell. But I guess to dive into nature conservation, just the pure fact that only 4% is going to nature conservation when it actually represents such a key part of solving climate change and supporting all of life is really overwhelming. There's just so much work that needs to be done to really galvanize resources and get them to efforts on the ground. So since most of the capital that we mapped to nature conservation is predominantly philanthropic capital, we did a detailed analysis of where that philanthropic capital is going. And one of the immediate gaps that we saw was the less than 6% that's going to indigenous land tenure. And because of the other work that we've done on the global safety net and really mapping a blueprint of just how many lands and oceans we need to protect and restore, and knowing that at least 40% of those lands are indigenous lands, it makes it really clear that there's a massive gap of financing and getting financing directly into the hands of local land stewards and indigenous peoples. And that's just such a critical one to call out.
A lot of the money goes to formerly protected lands like parks and whatever. But if we want to achieve, there's a lot of intact wilderness that needs to be stewarded that maybe doesn't happen through those formal mechanisms.
Totally.
But and also the only way we get there to protecting 50% or terrestrial and coastal ecosystems is if we're also protecting areas where humans are living, that it's also it's helping local communities and it's part of local communities living there. It's not just put a fence around it. Right. That's a huge part of that plan. And what's to me really interesting about the model. My background's in ecology, as I mentioned earlier, and I know that, like you were saying with solar before, like people often talk about, we need to plant a bunch of trees and this can make a difference. And then people argue about, well, how many trees could you plant? Is it enough? And all that stuff, or what could you protect? And the model uses the global safety net as to physically bound, like, well, how much forest area is there of different types that could be restored or that could recover? How much is there, of different kinds of ecosystems, so that if you did protect all this stuff, what does that add up to? It's the first I've seen that actually bounds it by what is physically possible and geographically, spatially allocated. Mm-hmm. So and then that says, that's the one that says, oh, that could actually pull down, even if we overshoot, suck down more carbon and keep us on track and increase the capacity of nature to inhale carbon.
Yeah.
Just to add more to that too, like within the work of the Global Safety Net, we've also prioritized which are the most high priority lands that need to be protected through the conservation imperatives work.
Right.
And that's really critical because there's over 16,000 unprotected sites around the world that house, incredible biodiversity, store carbon, and they're most at risk. And so not only do we need to galvanize money to Indigenous land stewardship, we have to be pretty strategic about where we're allocating that capital and protecting land and oceans through as much kind of local, Indigenous land stewardship as we can. Right. So it's all about kind of strategy. And
it's a prioritization framework, right?
Yeah.
It's not saying that only those conservation imperative areas are the ones that we need to address to somehow make the change that we're all trying to go towards. It's just to say these are flashing red, critical, you've looked at where the area is already protected versus not, where they're threatened species, where are the hot spots, what are the socioeconomic conditions in these areas, and then map the entire planet best we can with all these different data sets, and then come up with what percentage of land is it? It's like less than 1% or 2%.
I think it's less than like 0.2%. It's
0.2%. It's like, these are the flashing red, like if you're going to deploy
they're
conservation.
They're the magenta zones on the map. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Right. And not to make it a One Earth commercial, but it just fits so perfectly in the stat. I guess it's kind of good to make it a One Earth commercial. I'm down for One Earth commercial. But you have the bioregional map, you have the solutions framework, you have the conservation imperatives, now you have Minding the Gaps report, you have the solutions finance tracker. These things are a gold mine for being able to be strategic with capital for climate, right? Like, how do I put my funds to work, whether I have $20 or $20 million, right?
That's right.
Like, this is where you can have a greater impact, and to, also have a sense of optimism and hope and confidence in our future. Like, this is something that if we all come together, we can actually really meaningfully change.
Yeah, just to add in a little bit of context too about like why we built all of those pieces with a collective of amazing, experts and scientists and local expertise and traditional knowledge holders. We did all of this because my experience when I was working with Leo's foundation was just that the bigger organizations who we need, we need all the help we can get, especially on kind of nature conservation and environment issues.
Right.
But it's a really competitive landscape for funding. And often it's the bigger organizations that have the resources in order to come up with the best marketing campaign, or, they've made an investment in a piece of science and a way of framing things that's been around for 10 years and it's worked. And that's great. And many of those things are priorities. Right. But what we were really after was a true roadmap that was what the planet needs us to get done. What the planet needs us to get done, that weaves together multiple strategies from multiple organizations that have done incredible science and puts it together so that you have a cohesive blueprint, not just for One Earth, right? But for a collective, like for a movement. Because if anything's apparent, no one funder is going to do this. No one organization is going to do it. It is literally going to take all of us deploying all of these solutions and doing them strategically and making it feel like, because it's true, that every contribution counts. So that was the intention of this, was to really build something that was for the movement.
Yeah. And they're like, Justin was saying there are a lot, and because most of the money goes to a few shiny objects, then there's a lot of gaps to fill. And often we've been asked, oh, you've been tracking all the money. Like, what are the 3 big gaps we should fill? And I'm like, ooh, kind of depends. It depends on your interests. It depends on the kind of money you have. It depends on your strategy. And in fact, if everybody just went to fill, the same gap, then we still are screwed. We have the same problem all over again, because it's a systemic thing, and it's additive, and it's and it's multiplicative. That by solving this thing, it helps this other thing be successful. So I feel like there's this. So that requires that everybody can find gaps, not just annual gaps, but relative to their needs, their interests. And also relative to the type of money they have to deploy. That philanthropy may be better over here where there's no profit to be made. Maybe there's low risk or risk tolerant capital that can help stimulate something over here that that isn't going yet. There's places where there's a lot of money going to it. Let's say in renewable energy, solar, but it's getting out in the world, but it's not reaching everybody. So that's where philanthropy could help get it out. Make it more accessible, because we won't get there if 100% of the people don't have access. Like that's the simple math is that, and that's the exciting thing about it, is that it also means that we only win if everybody wins. You can't protect nature if you don't overcome extreme poverty in certain communities. The solutions are actually helping, improve livelihoods. The solutions are making free energy accessible to everybody, not just rich people, right? The solutions are, all those things are part of the solution. It's not just some other separate thing that we want to work on, social equity or something.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned kind of matching to what type of capital, because, for-profit and nonprofit capital, just even at the highest level is like, it operates very differently. And maybe we can just pull on that conservation thread in this lens as well, because, you mentioned, and I saw it in the tracker, like if I search nonprofits, good contributions to conservation, search for-profit, very tiny.
There's a few, yeah.
And so is it that conservation's not investable? Is that kind of the part of the takeaway? Like, okay, we can invest in renewables because there's some sort of ROI, but we don't really have a good private market mechanism for investing in conservation. Or is it just a blind spot of the private capital markets right now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think right now what you do see is like investments in like enabling technologies for monitoring, for making things more efficient. So that seems like that's where the money goes. It's a little bit like in the energy side early on. The easiest investments were in energy efficiency, because it's like technology to save money on your energy bills in a building, that kind of thing. So I feel like there's a world in there of investments in technology enablers.
Yeah, conservation tech, yeah.
Yeah, or just, really good fire risk modeling that then helps you, make a good plan about what you should do to mitigate all that, and then you save tons of money on houses that didn't burn down and all the rest, and then there's a market for that. And so, but the real trick though on the nature side is we do still somehow need to make nature more valuable alive than dead, and in a lot of places it's just more valuable in the short run dead. And there's a lot of people working on like creative financial mechanisms to flip that that equation. So it's
any that you're particularly excited about?
To be honest, I'm still learning. It's all, like I'm not a finance person, and I'm part of this World Economic Forum group on innovative finance for nature and climate, and it's all wonky like finance speak, and I'm like, oh, there's a lot to learn here. But it's really inspiring that there are people who are thinking about it really creatively about what could be done.
I have a podcast to recommend you to.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah, please do. Yeah, because I want to learn. Yeah. And then when you talk about too, like different kinds of capital for different kinds of things on the investment side, it's also different kinds of investment capital. So we were working with a family office that does really forward-thinking investments in climate, and their explicit strategy is to fund underfunded things. I'm like, oh, that's great. Like we want to work with you. Yeah. But they were like, we take early stage, we fund early stage things. So we're at that early stage investment side, not later growth stage and that kind of thing. Right. So they really wanted a lens on the One Earth framework of like, what are the solutions for which there's not a lot of early stage attention, not very many early rounds, not many early stage companies, or the funding per company is not very high at the early stage. So we did like a lens of just looking at the early stage landscape across the One Earth solutions, and then we could overlay, let's say, a portfolio of companies and say, oh, this company is working on a particular solution that otherwise has a lot of other people in it, or this company is working on a solution that there are no other early stage companies there, like was in like agroforestry or silvopasture or forest health recovery, and so that really helps prioritize. Like, oh, well, we can say like this particular entity, when you put it in the bigger context, there's nobody else doing that. But their lens was really like early stage innovation, and you see different patterns with that, totally different patterns than if you looked at late stage money or where are people not getting loans to build their first factory or their first demonstration project. There's all these different nuances to it. So that's why you need a wide range of people with different kinds of money types and interests to like and help them focus on the holes that they need to fill.
Yeah. What are the ways that this will become a living body of work? You mentioned like ongoing reports, but like, so as funders respond to get different gaps, like what's the plan around updates and kind of how?
We're setting up to be updatable. We found that we started wanting to do it every quarter, but we realized that it was just too much work for the pace at which things change. So we're doing it every 6 months. And then at the same time, we keep evolving the language models to bring in more things or reclassify things. With the One Earth framework, we started to actually break down every of those like 75-ish to 80 solutions into like more specific technologies and approaches. So we've got about almost 1,000 of those that we're working on to blow that out so that then it gets really specific to what's going on. So there's a lot of ways to evolve it to make it more useful and more practical as we learn from a funder, like what is it that they need. Right. So that's why the work that we do, our work is philanthropically supported to build these public tools. And then the other part of our work is we do contract work with specific funders to use the data to help them make a decision. And often the cool thing about, because we have some philanthropic support, then we pick and choose. That gives us a little freedom to pick and choose who we work with that is really aligned with what we're trying to do, and that if we help them, we could help the field. Yep. So with the example I just told you, then we take those learnings and we put them back in the public tool and add more views to that to shine a light on gaps of that type.
So if I'm a big funder, maybe on the investment side or on the philanthropic side, and we've got a thesis around biochar, and we want to make sure that we're deploying check sizes of this level in these regions, looking for like I can call, hey, Eric, let's set up a bit of a project that builds from this entire body of work, but to start
exactly,
to kind
and
of
then we dive into that lens,
and
then maybe they have this framework internally where they're like, well, for that to work, there also needs to be a market for this, and we also need that. Like they have their own little framework, and then we can reslice the money to that. Like, well, who's working on that? Who's working on that? Who's funding it? Who's co-funding it that you didn't know about? If you wanted to build a syndicate, like what are other people that are funds that are funding similar kinds of things that you didn't know about? So it's sort of like, how do we use the data to facilitate in that way?
What I like about that is it creates kind of an ongoing financial sustainability incentive to keep the data fresh, to get more data sources, to have more folks giving you feedback on what's useful. And
totally. And it's always like when you get in the weeds of an analysis that you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that question. That's a really good one. And then you're like, oh, I think we could actually do that. And then you're like, oh, maybe other people would find that useful too. So I'm my background is in research, so I can't resist like going down the rabbit hole with a particular funder that has a particular question. So
I can't wait to have like the map of all the different financial types more, like lending, equity.
Exactly. That's what we're working on. Project finance is
swaps, project finance, and to be able to kind of slice those as another, lens in this.
Totally. And geographies. It can get a lot more nuanced. Most of this analysis is US-based nonprofits and companies, you still get a global lens because so much finance is flowing through the U.S.
Right.
But it could get even more granular and more helpful to understanding geographies that have different finance issues and different challenges
sure,
and
yeah,
different
yeah.
roadmaps of nature we need to protect.
Yeah, on the investment side, we have now access to some really great databases to do more like the investments and project finance globally.
Cool.
That's climate relevant. The philanthropy is difficult because in the U.S. it's kind of standardized the tax reporting requirements.
Right.
And we've had a lot of conversations with folks in Europe about that, where it's really hard. Like that's more like you need relationships with the big funders, and then they disclose to you what they're doing. But there's no standard practice across every country for how that's reported. And so we're trying to work on that. And that's where on the quality of the data side, we talked about a little earlier. We know we're missing things.
Right.
We know this isn't perfect, but this is a really good sample. It's not a census. And we're trying to estimate, is there 10 times more money here than there, or 100 times more money here than there? And then we know things are missing. So we'll run some like computational stats on it to be like, okay, let's just resample it 1,000 times with replacement and see like what's the error bar on it, like how much noise is there in their data, and is the difference we're seeing, what's the signal in the noise? Because I don't think we need perfect knowledge to just move forward in the right direction. We need to put money in under uncertainty. A bunch of these things might totally fail, but we need to keep moving in the right direction. And if we're just trying to have perfect knowledge, we'll never go anywhere.
Right.
Can I just share one other thing that was really insightful for me to understand was once you had this holistic framework and an understanding of what needs to get done, and then you look at capital flow and specifically bringing in investment and philanthropic.
Right.
And you look at where there are markets and where there are not, it really validated something near and dear to my heart, which was around philanthropy and the critical role that philanthropy plays. Because I feel like over the last couple of years, there's been so much excitement up until this year. But no, I'm just kidding. It's not changing. Around climate finance. And you heard more and more folks talking about, well, I can make money and save the world too.
Right.
And suddenly it became, well, philanthropy, well, that's just like really, it's just charitable donations and it's not really driving impact. And to me, it made it really clear just how critical philanthropy is in this moment. Like specifically for nature conservation, specifically for regenerative agriculture, specifically for people driving solutions on the ground. And it really makes a case for how strategic philanthropic investments to the things that really need it can lead to new innovations, can lead to new investments. But it makes the case for that. And I really feel like it makes a good call to action for people to lean in with those resources too.
Yeah, totally. And I think just now that you can show that it's doable and that the impact that it really potentially can have, it's huge. And there is a lot of, there's a lot of philanthropic money just sitting there that isn't getting out. It's not like there isn't money out there.
It needs to move. I mean, we really this is it. This is the moment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would add that the way that this system is bifurcating between people with enormous sums of wealth and those without it, that's all far in excess to need, right? And so that is going to show up in part as philanthropic capital opportunity. And ideally the system wouldn't be designed this way, where we wouldn't be relying so much on this strange institutional form of finance called philanthropy, but that's where we're at right now.
Exactly.
And so, to just kind of dismiss philanthropy as some sort of inefficient, charitable aid program. No, this is a very critical catalytic role to the survival of our species. And so we need to really take it seriously and show up and have these conversations with foundations and strategic philanthropy.
Right, because the outcome of those things is a public good, that we're putting into.
Exactly.
Yeah, they can literally build the future that we want. That's a pretty critical role to be playing.
Yeah. So Justin, what are you seeing? And I mean, we've had many conversations, you and I, but you've sat on both sides of the table. You've sat through different political swings. Been working on this for a long time. What are you seeing in philanthropy writ large? Where are we at 2025 here at Climate Week?
I mean, I see a lot of people that have been committed to climate and biodiversity and nature remain just as committed as ever, you know? But I think it's about those people that are already committed, just feeling resilient and connected and continuing to like push forward regardless of the winds against us. And then I think it's a moment to ask others who have maybe been sitting on the fence or are fearful to find all the ways that they can lean in. I mean, this is the moment to have moral courage and to really fight for the future that you believe in. And at One Earth, you know, we're here to build that movement. We're here to encourage people to work together, to utilize tools and resources and roadmaps. We're thinking about this fall about how folks can adopt and align with our framework. There's a lot of interesting back and forth between Eric's team and our team as they bring people in who want to do, you know, maps of their specific kind of assets and what they're investing in. Then suddenly they get informed about the One Earth framework, and then they're interested to learn more, and it can shift their mindset and their knowledge set about what needs to get done. So it's an interesting moment. And then we've had a lot of individuals start to come to us and ask, well, One Earth has a long history in philanthropic, you know, re-granting to great projects on the ground. Do you have a fund to mine the gaps?
Right.
And we're building that right now because we want to be able to meet that need. And we just believe in the ground game.
Yep.
We want to help fill those gaps. And I think we need a whole ecosystem of people that are committed to protecting the future. And having had the privilege of working with that network for almost 20 years, I have a lot of faith in it. And it's always kept me going. So I'm just like, double down. Let's do this.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then I was just thinking too, when you just on the complementary side of the private investment side, which is a little easier to track the trends on it more recently, like what's happened since January, things like that. So we in let's say Crunchbase data, if you're like tracking investments in climate relevant companies over time, as I mentioned earlier, like starting in like 2019, boom, it really went up. And the question was that a climate trend or was that just like the market was doing great, right? And in 2021 or when the interest rates went up, then venture started to decline. There was a little crash. Was that like the climate bubble's over, or was that just the overall market went down? So we, being a statistician, you know, I'm like, well, you got to compare that to, you know, what would it happen otherwise? Is it to chance? You know, like what is it? The difference? So I pulled 1,000 random samples from Crunchbase of non-climate companies, and then just says, okay, if of the same size, let's say, you know, like how many, just pull 1,000 random samples that are the same size as the one, and then look at its trends over time, and then I could see that the climate boom, you know, it was like 4 times the growth rate of the broader market. You know, it was huge. And then when it came down, it was just tracking the market in the rest of the market, that it was just an overall market trend. So you could see a climate trend versus an overall market decline. And if you look now in the last couple of years, the ups and downs, like climate is not over as an investment. Like it's just tracking the rest of the market. It's pretty similar. The trends are when it's going up and down. So when people say, oh, the money's declined, it's just because the market went down. And in fact, in the non-equity side, like loans and, you know, debt rounds, they're going up at twice the rate of the broader market because there's more mature companies getting those rounds. So it's super interesting to see that it still has not been affected. We do see the government rounds in there, and you see this big pulse from the Inflation Reduction Act of loans and grants and things that is gone, right? It's like a big pulse, but that was just a couple years. And before that, there's a slice of government funding, like National Science Foundation business, you know, innovation grants and ARPA-E grants and, to non-equity funding to companies or some venture rounds. And that slice that's what we're really losing now, is that slice. And and the check sizes there are like $700,000 to $1 million, you know, on average to companies for these seed grants and things like that, which is totally doable by private funding to fill that gap. Maybe like 100 of them a year on average, and then the venture side is from the government was maybe $10 million check sizes going to companies, which is pretty, not unusual and, like fillable in the private sector. So I think that gap could be filled, but that's what we're seeing is missing. And for sure, climate companies were getting more government grants than non-climate companies because they fit the bill there. So maybe in our tracker, about 20% of all the companies in there had some form of government funding in the past, including companies like Tesla and everything. They all had government loans and grants and all the rest. But that's sort of that core thing is what we're missing. We talk a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that just got clawed back, but which is tragic. I mean, it was really...
It's like $8 billion or something?
Well, no, that was $20 billion. $20
billion.
Yeah, that was supposed to go out. And that money, and that was supposed to fill that gap, which we just talked about, which was, it was going to make all this amazing renewable energy technology accessible to low-income communities. So it was really about decarbonizing low-income communities, like zero interest loans to put in, to retrofits in solar and, community solar, et cetera. And the whole outcome of that would have been no energy bills for low-income communities, for rural communities. It would have been clean energy, energy independence, energy security, all these things. And that was the gap that the tech world doesn't fill immediately. Like they're building tech for the rich because that's what the model is. And then you hope it gets cheap and later. But there's not this intentional, like, how do we really make this accessible to everybody? Yeah.
And my understanding about that greenhouse gas reduction funding that got cut is that we still have until the end of the year or another 12 months before it's fully turned off, and that there is still the government matching. Do you know?
Oh, it's a good question. So a huge part of the Inflation Reduction Act was more tax credits. It wasn't a direct handout. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund was the single biggest granting program, and then the idea of that was it was like $27 billion, I think, total, and it was mostly going out to community lenders, like community development finance institutions, that then would be empowered to give really like zero interest loans and or grants to communities to build out, to decarbonize those communities, and even a lot of that got out the door during the Biden administration, but then Lee Zeldin, the head of the EPA, accused them of money fraud and then clawed it back. And we worked with some of those entities that they got the money. It was like $6 billion in their bank account. And then their bank accounts got frozen by the FBI with no real cause other than some accusation that it was wire fraud, but it wasn't. Yeah. And then they won in court. The government won. So CPA won in court. So then it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Yep.
But when you think about all the work that went into building, like building those new buckets of funding and all the work that organizations took on to make it possible to deploy that work.
Well, the thing about that was just so tragic was I remember when I was getting it, we were going to start tracking all the Inflation Reduction Act money. And as I got into it, I was like, wow, this is a really well-designed, like it's so well thought out. It's like so refreshing to have a government that actually had really good people thinking really holistically about how to deploy this in a way that would provide like the biggest impact and help the most people that really need it and transform our economy. And all the money was designed to go, because a lot of low-income communities are in red states. It was like a lot of it goes into red states, so it will be resistant to any kind of political change. Because how could you argue against this? And then nobody anticipated the power of just the desire for retribution. It's pure retribution because it makes no sense to cut it if you care about energy independence, if you care about about helping people with and just everything makes sense. It's forget about climate change. It is just such a smart thing to do for our communities, for just reliable power, for everything, and it's just being done out of pure retribution. It's like that I didn't anticipate that the power of like that, like just raw desire to just screw people over would do that. Yeah.
And I think that brings me to just part of why I've appreciated your work and One Earth's work for so many years, Justin, because you in the face of so many challenges and so many roadblocks, have consistently struck a chord of resilient optimism and just like persistence in the face of challenges, that a collective belief that we can actually build a better future together and that we'll get through this. And yeah, in terms of closing comments, would love to hear, like what's keeping you both going in the face of all of this. And yeah, like what's ahead, and also any practical action steps and key messages you want people to take away in terms of the Minding the Gaps report and engaging with the work.
Sure. Well, first off, you can go find the report on our website at oneearth.org. It's also mindingthegaps.oneearth.org. And would love for people to dive in and, send us your email, send us your comments, your thoughts, your ideas, your questions. Because like Eric was just saying, getting that feedback and having this really be a two-way street really creates even better knowledge hubs, products, tools, relationships, ways that we can drive this together. Share the report, utilize it to do your, to make your cases for why and where financing should flow. And then I guess just to summarize things that really feel important to me right now. So I've known for a while that, there's been recent reports of, over the last couple of years, the fact that the majority of the world's youth knows that climate change is happening. 70% of the world's youth believe in climate change, know it's happening, and are alarmed by it. But most of those folks also think there's nothing they can do about it. So to me, this week in particular, at one of the speaking engagements I had, and when I shared the framework and I shared the results of the Minding the Gaps report and walked through what this is for, she came up to me and said, you just described the future that I'm fighting for. And she broke into tears. And then I broke into tears. And it was mostly because like the fact that she feels seen and heard and recognized by what we've been sequentially building with so many others, and doing it in honor of them, it makes it all worth it. And we have to build that together. That is a collective effort, and it requires resilience, it requires courage, and it requires committing to believing in what you know is possible. And that is not an individual path, that's a collective path. So join us.
Thank you, Justin. Any final words, Eric?
Yeah, I want to build on what you just said. It's a better future, right? Like it really is. And I literally had been thinking about changing the name of our climate finance tracker to the Better Future Finance Tracker. Like forget about climate. And I even got the domain name bfftracker.org. And because I feel like you can start to get focused on this existential crisis, but the solutions are really a better future. And I think a lot about now, and when I go through, because as we're tracking all these solutions and organizations on the ground, I'm like, oh, that's a cool solution. I never thought of that. And so then I think about how like, if we do this like in a decade or whatever, we'll look back and be like, wow, do you remember when we used to drive around in cars that were like steam engines that had little explosions going on them to propel us forward? Like, do you remember when we used to have smog? Do you
drank all our water out of plastic?
Yeah. Do you remember when we got an induction stove and then now when I go to a gas stove, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, do you remember when we used to light a fire inside our house just to boil water and it took forever? And, like so many things like that. I mean, even like just like urban biodiversity, like, do you remember when we used to have to drive 3.5 hours to go to a park to see nature? When now it's like right here. Do you remember when like so many things like that? Do you remember when we used to feed our kids food laden with pesticides? Like that, it was like, what were we doing? Right? Like I feel like if you think about it that way, you don't need to talk about the climate crisis. Right. And you can depoliticize the whole thing. The more specific you get, like you don't need to talk about a just transition. You just talk about lowering people's energy bills, right? Like it's like, as the more specific you get, it's incontrovertibly good. And so to me, that was like a really enlightening thing that I got from the One Earth solution framework, that, this whole shifting of like from just screaming that there's a problem and trying to convince everybody to like just focusing on all these things that need to be done. So yeah.
One thing to add to that is that later this fall, it's already underway, but in a month or so, it's going to be in its kind of full state, is the One Earth Solutions Hub. And so we've worked with a UX UI designer, and really, because we have so much prolific content, both about the solutions, the technical descriptions, the photography, but then also the companies or the nonprofits doing it and showcasing that work. So at the Solutions Hub, all that's going to come together and make it a really vibrant, kind of inspiring experience to learn and to see what we mean when we talk about energy efficiency. It's boring when you just talk about energy efficiency,
Right.
but then when you map it down to specific new things that are being built or companies that are emerging or nonprofits, it becomes very people-centric and real. And it's all about those real, tangible things. And that's what's so fun. And then you think about the mosaic of all those solutions and all those people, and it becomes really fun and exciting. And it's a clear opportunity.
Right.
And that's the intention of this work, is to make you feel like it is an opportunity. It's just an untold story. And it's such a rich opportunity to build it out together.
Eric, Justin, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks
Thanks,
you.
Matthew.
Yeah. Links in the show notes to all of the resources discussed here. Most importantly, go to oneearth.org and dive in. And of course, all of our conversations are at maearth.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.